But RFK had this amazing interview with Tucker. And I say amazing because, once again, no candidate is talking about this. You know, Cornel West had an interview with me. And if you go to Cornel West's Twitter, which has a million followers, you usually see him saying, thank you, so-and-so, brother and sister, for having this interview with me. And we had these great conversations about this and that. Thank you, so-and-so. He thanks RBN. He thanks Savvy Sabs. He thanks everybody who does an interview with him. He thanks Laura Ingraham, Dana Bash. Thank you, CNN, everybody. But guess who he didn't say thank you to? Me. Because I actually put him in a position where he was moonwalking the whole time because it's a very weak area. Now, he had said, Don, that he wanted to go out. He wanted to talk to Trumpers. He wanted to talk to conservatives. We're going right into the land of Trump. I'm going to talk to those brothers and sisters. And I said to him, I said, hey, what about this and that, about the COVID, about, WHO, about Klaus Schwab, what about you praising anti-Fauci? And he didn't have much answers. And it's not only him, the Biden administration, and even Donald Trump. The people want to say, well, Donald Trump wasn't as bad as Joe Biden on COVID. He didn't push for mandates, but he pushed for Operation Warp Speed. There's only one presidential candidate that has a certain language that is very educational towards how all these bioweapons have been taking place and how the history of them, where the money's coming from, where the money's going, what needs to be done. And that candidate is RFK. And this information here,
bioweapons. He calls them bioweapons. He describes and he details the history of them. He details the international prohibitions against them, and he details the U.S. violations of the treaties that they're party to.
Who's talking about that? Nobody. Let's play a clip. Let's get it going.
Who else has discovery on from lawsuits that he's done against Big Pharma? Testimony from the executives, scientific studies that were introduced in court and helped to decide some of the things that were adverse to in other words, he speaks from a place of deep and up close knowledge, proximate knowledge on these issues in a way that none of them could even do if they try to construct it.
Yeah. No, I mean,
look, 1,000%. I'm not saying that means anything except for it means that.
But that is so valuable now. We need to have that because we have a comatose political society. They're sleeping at the wheel. So and this is something like all my old friends used to be, in the business, Don, they used to bitch about, we've been saying this shit for 2 years, the Tucker's been saying, well, we said this before that person, and we said that. Who cares? As long as it gets out there. And if it's a different voice that gets that information out there, if it's RFK's voice that elevates that message, all that we should really be worried about or care about is the fact that that message got out there.
That's right.
And that message is getting out there because he has a huge following. He's catching fire. There was people who were trying to say, like, oh, his campaign is over. He tanked it because of his Israel position. Well, if you think he tanked it because of his Israel position, then you don't know much about politics because, unfortunately, the majority of Americans still, and I agree with Cynthia, that I think more and more young Jewish people are waking up to what's going on and going, wait a second, I think we've been lied to. Kind of like American politics, empire education. There's a time it hits us down, we go like, maybe we aren't like Captain America going around and liberating these places. Maybe it is a little something different than that, you know what I'm saying? But there's still the majority of the people look at Israel as the victim because that's how they painted themselves, and a lot of people swallow and take the propaganda. So he didn't tank his campaign because of that. It's just one part of the common sense anti-imperialist leftists that have that's their red line. And I'm not gonna hold that against them. I just think they're wrong. And I think all this other information that he's bringing to the table is so important. Let's play a clip because we've been speaking for almost an hour before we got to the first clip. Oh my Lord. Let's play a little tuck, and I'll just say stop and pause. Yeah, you can put it up on the screen. Whatever you want to do. Cheese Slice, guys. Cheese Slice needs to get himself a buy me a coffee. This guy has been amazing. Jamie Cheese Slice, we love you. Go ahead, let's roll the clip. We're talking Don DeBar, Convo Couch, Tuesday, new time. Like, subscribe, get it out there, share. Here we go with Tuck.
So let me add, this is an interesting segue because Toria Nuland kind of blithely announced during congressional testimony last year that, oh, by the way, we have these biolabs in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that was like kind of ignored, and the people who covered it got attacked for covering it. But the fact remains there are U.S. biolabs in Ukraine. Why would we have biolabs in Ukraine?
We have biolabs in Ukraine because we're developing bioweapons. And, and those bioweapons are using all kinds of new synthetic biology and CRISPR technology and genetic engineering techniques that were not available to previous generation. And they can make frightening stuff. What happened was, when we walked away from, when the Patriot Act reopened the bioweapons arms race in 2001, the Pentagon began putting a lot of money into bioweapons, but they were nervous at that time because if you violate the Geneva Convention, it's a hanging offense. And they weren't sure that provision in the Patriot Act would actually hold up as a loophole to treaties that had been ratified by Congress. So they were nervous about actually going full force into bioweapons development. So they transferred the authority for biosecurity to one agency in the HHS called the National Institute for Infectious and Allergic Diseases, run by Anthony Fauci. So Anthony Fauci got all the responsibility for bioweapons development. He got at that time a 68% raise from the Pentagon in order to do that work. So, and that's why he was the highest paid official in the American government of 4 million people in the American. He gets more money. He got more money, $450,000 a year than the president. That any Supreme Court judge, any member of Congress, he was the highest paid, and it's because he got that 68% raised from the Pentagon to do bioweapons development. Now, when you do bioweapons development, every bioweapon needs a vaccine. So you develop them side by side because in 100% of the cases, when you deploy a bioweapon, there's blowback. Your side also gets sick. So in order to deploy one offensively, you need a vaccine to counter it. So you need to vaccinate your team before you deploy it.
Okay, so come on, Don. Like, who's talking that? Who's giving that information? Let's just pretend for a second that Cornel West was on that tip and he could start talking about those things and going after, but he's not. He's completely in the dark, avoiding these things, not even talking about it. And everybody else is talking from the other side, is standing with Big Pharma, is pushing Dr. Fauci. They got Dr. Fauci t-shirts. How valuable is this information that he's giving out right now? Can you please put that out there for me better so I don't look like the only nut job screaming about it?
I was hoping you were going to play my favorite clip, because another thing that he did was describe exactly how the CIA is constructed into 4 divisions, 3 of which are about gathering information to provide to the government, the president particularly, so they know what's going on in the world and they can anticipate and address any threats that arise to the country, whether they're military or political threats from other countries, environmental, solar flare coming next Tuesday, whatever. So they have actual intelligence on what's going on around the world. Yeah. And then the 4th section arrogated unto itself almost really from the beginning the right and certainly has exercised the power to conduct all kinds of operations around the world, killing leaders like Patrice Lumumba, having all kinds of coups d'etat and gaming up wars, putting together various strategies for economic strangulation, all these horrible things that the U.S.
Let's see if we can get that clips out there. Guys, if you guys can go through Twitter real quick. Anybody put that clip up so we can do that? But yes, definitely.
That section.
I think I want to see that clip.
And then he says, like his uncle, which most people think, that this is one of the primary things that he said that got his head shot off, was that he would go in, take that section of the CIA, smash it to pieces, and scatter it to the 4 winds. And Bobby
4 wins.
Kennedy, after watching his uncle and his father be murdered, is running for president and saying that. Now, I don't give a good goddamn who the hell you think you are as an activist. I don't see anybody out here, with the exception of Cynthia McKinney, maybe about a dozen other people that I know in this country, putting themselves out there anyway close to that.
Yeah.
But they all got a lot to say.
Yeah.
And not a fucking one of them has an alternate plan.
Yeah.
And I got a problem with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, and this stuff he's talking about in these clips now, when it comes to the bioweapons, because you spoke about it right before we played the clip, how he explains it, he gives the history, he puts everything into perspective, is so important to what we're going to face right now. You know, a lot of people keep saying this whole thing, COVID's over, COVID's over. No, it ain't over. Is there some, and this is a $5 chat over on Rumble too. Somebody says, I think it's more likely than not that RFK will not do what he says he will do if he got elected, which he will not. But is there something to the fact that a lot of people are thinking that, no, I don't want to have faith in somebody again. It's another trap door. If we elect RFK and then he just turns his back on us, all will be lost and we would have wasted that time again. And I keep telling people, no, we won't, because the education, the advancement of the knowledge of the populace in America will be moved in the right direction, because all you freaks who are screaming for revolution, you got to understand the people got to be pushed to a point where they can't be pushed no more. They're not there yet. So they got to understand what's going on.
They got to know what to do, too.
The problem is your neighbor, not your government. Go ahead.
They got to know what to do, too. First, they got to know what's actually going on. Not what they think is going on, but what's actually going on. And then they have to be able to find a way to formulate a plan, which is very difficult. Look, you asked a question in there somewhere, which the question was basically, are people afraid of being disappointed again? You know, Bernie Sanders betrayal or whatever kind of stuff.
He won't do what he says when he gets in office, is what they're afraid of, Don.
Look, fuck that. It has nothing to do with that. The first order of business, look, I see my favorite candidate and I'm going to vote for him, and then he didn't do what I want to do. Grow the fuck up.
Woo!
This is a world here. This shit is going on, and it's material. Woo. What is what is. Not what you would like to be what is. What is going to come out of this presidential election? Not what would you like to. Who in the hell has ever elected anyone to save them? Who's ever had someone come in to save them? You got to get off your ass and save yourself. And first, you got to start with understanding where you are. And then you got to, the next step is to try to understand what it is that you can do about it.
Yeah.
And if you look at these people, like one of them is going to come in on a horse and rescue you. And oh my God, if they disappoint me, my heart will be broken. You're in the wrong goddamn game. You should be living on a planet, or you should be rich somewhere. That's not how it is.
All right. Don DeBar here, ladies and gentlemen. We're going over some stuff. We'll go over the Kennedy stuff with the Tucker interview. We'll talk about educating the public on bioweapons, where they come from, the funding. No candidates talking like that. I don't give a damn. And I agree, Don, if that's the way you feel, you know, hey, listen, you made your Super Rumble up there. Thank you so much. Don gave you the answer. I kind of feel the same way too as well. Like I say, the education, the discourse is what's most important to me, to get people on the same page. You know, the number one message I think that we have to get out there is that there's a ruling class. That's who's causing all the problems, not your neighbor. And then we can work our way backwards from there. Let's play the rest of this clip, and then we'll get on to the next part of, which is talking about the Ukraine war. So,
okay.
So those two things are developed through a field of science called gain of function science, where you take an infectious microbe and you amplify its infectivity, or you make it jump species, so it may kill monkeys. Now you make it kill humans, and you adopt it that way. And there's all kinds of methods, and then you make it immune to antibiotics and to therapeutic drugs and to other therapies. So it's actually the inverse of medicine. For 2,800 years since Hippocrates, doctors have been trying to figure out how to make microbes less infectious and less deadly and develop antibiotics and therapeutics to do that. Well, the guys who are involved in this, there's 36,000 what are called life scientists, but they're actually death scientists who are now employed full-time in developing, microbes that can be used to kill people.
But given the experience we just had 3 years ago, where a virus from a biolab overturned
So let me just finish this brief history about what happened. In 2014, 3 of those microbes escaped. Fauci built labs all over the country, in Galveston and Boston, everywhere. They're BSL-4 labs. We don't even know how many there are, BSL-3 and BSL-4. We have no idea how many there are. There's, we've counted them. I have a new book coming out that goes through the ones we know. But there are many secret ones that people don't know about. And they're doing it here in the United States. But in 2014, 3 bugs escaped from 3 different labs. And they were high-profile breaks, and they were very dangerous things, smallpox and a couple of other bad microbes. The public learned about it, and there was a lot of publicity, and Congress held hearings. 300 scientists wrote President Obama and said, you've got to shut down Anthony Fauci because he's going to create a microbe that will cause a global pandemic. And so Obama signed a moratorium that shut down the 18 worst of Anthony Fauci's experiments, where most of them were taking place in Galveston and in North Carolina by a scientist called Ralph Barrick down there. And instead of obeying that law, Anthony Fauci shifted a lot of his operations offshore. And those operations ended up, most of them in the Wuhan lab, which is a military lab, and that the Chinese run, the People's Liberation Army. And then a lot of them went to the Ukraine. So a lot of that science now, and it's funded, Fauci was funding lots of it. But then the other government agencies began to get confidence in, their ability to get away with it. And most of it is being funded by the Department of Defense. Most of all, the biggest single funder is USaid, which is, a CIA cutout.
Well, it was ending anyways, right? So, I mean, there you are, dude. It's like, look, in the beginning of this, he talked about Ukraine and what's going on there. Because I know that DC was in the chat, my good friend, going, look what he said in his speech, his opening speech, when he was like, we are all Ukraine, trying to stand with the people. But he's always been against the whole, provoking, the provocative nature, the provoking nature of the United States and what we did in 2014 and why we're here. He laid this out in this whole interview. He talked about, he went back to Gorbachev and the East Germany and NATO, and he went to all that and explained this. So he leaves no stone unturned when it comes to, I think he's the best at that of all the candidates by far. Some people will argue that Cornel West is there, but not like this. But what he's talking about right now, and this is the reason why I want to talk about this stuff, because they were able, my good friend Terry Mattson, who Thursday nights, guys, we do our What the F is Going On in Latin America with Terry Mattson. Please check it out if you want to learn a little bit more detail what's going on in Latin America. She even said this whole speech, she said they were able to get people to quarantine in their house without even putting a tank in the street. This is serious shit. They wanted to rearrange society because of this bioweapon, which was nothing more than the flu, low-end flu that had other, I can't say that stuff on the YouTube channel, but, I'm saying, they're not certified to go after and, cure or work on COVID, but there was other therapeutics that other people weren't allowed to talk about or talking about. Whatever the case may be, it is important because it almost appears that they want to go back and roll it back into doing this shit again. And that is more about them moving people into QR codes and central bank digital currencies. I know Wendy's listening to this shit. That's what this is about. And if they don't understand what had happened to him, he's laying it out in perfect detail, even to the point where the libertarians love it because they understand where the funding is coming from. This is important, Don. Let's put a bow on this section, but give me your opinions about what he just said right there, and we'll move on to the Ukraine war.
Well, to me, And this is looking at it from the outside. I don't have privity with the internal workings of any of these military agencies, but it seems to me what the purpose of this was, having read the executive order that they put in front of Trump in September of 2019, before there was any COVID. They wanted to scale up their ability to produce vaccines for anything that presents itself very quickly. They wanted to be able to do it, and they wanted to be able to do much more of it in terms of production than they were capable of doing using the existing technology. And so out of everything that they had been looking at for 15 years or so prior to that, the thing that looked like it had some promise to them, or in any event that they chose as the first place to go, was this mRNA technology. And so within 3 months of having Trump sign this executive order, I think it was September 17th of 2019, suddenly people start getting sick, and within a month or 2 or 3, they start calling it COVID, and within a month or 2 or 3, it's a pandemic. And then suddenly this vaccine gets rolled out, quote unquote. If you want to call it a vaccine, it's really not. Now, what does this scenario suggest to me? The scenario suggests to me that they're building the architecture for defensive measures for a bacteriological war that they intend to conduct. And we're all lab rats for that.
Well, there you go, guys. That's that section right now. We're going to wrap it, put a bow on it, and let it go from there. And somebody said, why don't you just, elect Obama? He said all the right things. He didn't say the shit to the level and the degree that RFK is saying. Guys, come on, man.